Hello again, welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion of CSS and CSS animation. So far we've created kind of the starting place for our animation, and the idea now is to make these petals kind of fan out and open up. So the goal here is that if each of the petals starts, if I remove the transform, the individual transform on each petal will start in this position. And what I want to do is I want to have each one rotate to the value that we have here, right? And so actually we're going to have to create an animation for each petal because the amount that they move is going to be different. Like the one in the center won't move at all, and the petal on the outside is going to move the farthest, and then the one in the middle here between the two is going to move about half that distance or rotate half that amount, okay? So let's get started with this, right? We're going to have to write a lot of animation here. I'm going to go to the bottom of my style sheet, and I'm going to add at keyframe, okay? And the at keyframe identifier lets you define a motion, okay? So you're going to define the motion. It won't say what is moving, right? But it'll just say, like, that something moves, right? And then you can take this keyframe and apply it to something as an animation. So I'm going to call this bloom number 1, okay? And there's a couple ways to work with this. I'm going to work with it in percents. So if we start at 0%, really what I'm doing is I'm saying, like, when the animation begins, we're going to be at 0% along the time of the animation. Okay, and then you could say at 50% something happens, and inside these blocks you're going to set the properties that you want. So you might say, color is red, and then 50% along the animation you could say color is blue, right? And then maybe at 100% along the animation you could say color is green, right? Okay, so something would cycle from red to blue to green. Notice it doesn't say how long this takes, so we're going to set that somewhere else. This just sets the keyframes for the animation, and keyframes set like the extremes of motion. So when something is animating, we define where it begins and ends, or where particular landmarks in the animation happen, and then the computer interpolates the values in between. So, if I say that the color should be red at the beginning and blue in the middle and green in the end, the computer will decide what happens at 25% and 75%, okay? Okay, so for this animation, I want the first bloom. Imagine that's the petal on the outside on the left, okay, the very first one. So I want that one, I don't want to change its color. What I want to do is I want to say transform and I want to do transform rotate. And that's actually our first petal up here, which was -45 degrees. Okay, so I could actually just borrow this, right? And I'm going to say you are going to be 45 degrees. And actually, my mistake, that's going to happen here at the end of the animation. At the beginning of the animation, the rotation should be 45 degrees, right? Because it should be this position that we see right now. And then I'm going to animate from here, -45 degrees to go down to about here, okay? So that's our first petal. And now, or wait, was that? Yeah, I think that's correct, right? That's correct. And now our second petal, right, is going to be bloom number 2, right? And this one's going to start at 45 degrees like the first one. So I just copied the keyframe there and pasted it. And the second one is going to end at 0 degrees, okay? Because that should be where it's pointing at this corner up here. Okay, so now petal number 3 isn't going to animate at all, so I'm going to skip it because that's the one in the middle. So it actually just sits still the whole time. But petal number 4 is going to start at 45 degrees and then rotate to 90 degrees, right? And we should check that against our other setup here. Pedal number 4 is 90 degrees, right? Okay. So there we go. Pedal 4 is going to start at 45 degrees, and then at 100% along the length of its animation, it's going to end at 90 degrees. So I'm going to copy this, and pedal number 5, so that's our last pedal, right? It's going to rotate down and be facing, 90 degrees out here. So it's going to start at 45 degrees, and then it's going to animate to 135 degrees. Okay? So those are all of our animations, and any style sheet can have as many animations as you want to put in there. You can put as many properties inside these keyframe percent blocks as you like. You can have as many percentage or keyframe steps as you want in here. In my case, I just have the 2, right? Just 0% to 100%. That's a pretty easy, common thing. Probably like the minimum you need for any situation, right? And now let's apply an animation, okay? So what I want to do is remember here, I have a few things like all my divs are going to share some properties, and then they're going to each have individual properties, okay? When we created the animations down here, we added a name to each one. So this is an identifier for the animation block, okay, for this set of keyframes. So I got bloom 1, 2, 4, and 5. So up here, I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to say you are going to be animation name bloom 1, okay? And then number 2 is going to be animation bloom number 2. And then animation 3 is not going to have any animation because that's the one in the middle. And number 4 is going to be animation bloom number 4. And the last one will be animation bloom number 5. Okay. So there we go. So we're off to a good start there. So now we need to apply a couple more features to get the animation to work. So we have to say, like, how long does the animation take, right? And then we should say how many times should it repeat, right? And then there's also some other details in there. We have to say, like, what happens when it ends, okay? And then does it ease in or ease out? Okay, so we'll cover those in a moment. I'm going to go up to the div here, and I'm going to apply this to all the animations. It'll just be easier, so all the divs will share these properties, right? So they all have a different animation, but then they can all share some properties. So I'm going to set the animation duration, right? And let's make the animation duration 6,000 milliseconds, okay? And now you can see my pedals are animating. For some reason, the 2 on this side are not animating, right? I'll fix that in a minute. Maybe I made a mistake there. Animation name. I think it looks pretty good. I'm missing something though. Okay, so I got my animation duration, and then everybody has an animation name, okay? Now let me refresh this and let's watch it one more time, and then I'll figure out what I'm doing wrong there. Oh yeah, and then it works this time, whatever, right? Okay, so notice they all animate, take 6 seconds, and at the end they snap back to the beginning. Let's do that one more time. Everybody opens up. 6,000 milliseconds later, they all go back to the beginning. So this is kind of a frustrating thing, and it's not obvious what's going on here, but essentially when an animation ends, the computer just says, well, you know what, I'm going to put everybody back to where they were at the beginning, right? Kind of snap them back to the beginning. And there's a special property that controls that behavior, and it's called animation fill mode, okay? And the fill mode determines like how, the name doesn't really lend itself to describing it, but it determines like what happens when the animation ends, right? And so it can be backwards, forwards, both, none, inherit, unset. I'm going to choose forwards, right? And we'll see everybody animate. And they get to the end and they stop. So essentially when I set fill mode forwards, it's going to end at the forward position or the end of the animation. If I set backwards, that's what we saw in the default. It's going to snap back to the beginning. Okay? So anyway, so that's gets us working with CSS animation. I'm going to save this and stop the video. I'm going to challenge you to play with the duration and then also play with the angles down here on the keyframe blocks. And if you want, even add another property here. So you could change the background color and then animate the background color. Okay? You could animate the corner radius so they change shape as they animate. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for you to experiment with, and this is an open-ended challenge. You try any of your ideas and apply them here. But the easy ones that I would apply are changing the color and changing the time of the animation. Okay, and then also applying that down here to the various keyframes. Okay, so give that a try, and then we'll continue in the next video. And as always, have a great afternoon.